Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
CanusAlbinus,
Makalua,
TheMeInTeam,
MegaBearsFan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 378 of PolyCast. I'm ChrisD, not here because Mackie's currently under however many feet of snow in Texas. And I'm joined by the usual co-hosts of CanusAlbinus,
we got plenty of snow here.
TheMeInTeam,
always bringing rebalance to the map.
and a relatively quiet MegaBearsFan.
If my audio sounds like crap, I'm sorry. I guess that's what you get for letting your kid use the computer one time for remote learning.
Ooh, dear.
You had one job!
One job not to break everything.
Oh, that could explain a lot, actually. Was it
dear.
Skype or Zoom?
I don't know, but it should have been on another user profile, which means it should not have affected anything on my account, but who knows?
It's Windows, so it affects everything.
Yeah, shouldness versus what happens is two different concepts, unfortunately.
Yep. A little out of practice at this. But we had a big patch a month ago. Well, because we missed last week's episode, or last episode due to illness. We are still talking about the recently released Vietnam pack and Kubla Khan. So, has anybody had a chance to play with them?
Both of them. Several times. It's interesting. In particular, you really do have to adjust your playstyle, obviously, with Vietnam, since you can only put your districts on features, which kind of makes your initial thought of where everything goes very different.
Yeah,
not
being able to tuck your industrial hubs into floodplains in between dams and aqueducts, that kept catching me off guard, because you can't.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing
on floodplains.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing that screwed me over the first time, because I thought floodplains and marsh were interchangeable, but apparently not.
Yeah, bad habits from Civ 5, I guess.
Well, and they both got the bonus from the Pantheon, but that doesn't mean they're the same thing, I guess.
Desert floodplains.
Well, yeah.
But there are other places other floodplains now that are not desert, don't get bonus, which is
Yeah.
The other thing interesting, obviously, about the leader ability for Vietnam is you really not only the fact that you're trying to put your districts in the removal features, you're trying to keep all your units in them, which in essence is a bit weird. So you're trying to put them into rough terrain so that they can move further, although they're usually then moving through more rough terrain. So it's kind of a lot of the time it kind of cancels out. Although the combat strength bonus is kind of handy.
Yeah, you really want to have a general so that you have that extra movement with your units when you're going in and out of like woods and rainforests.
That way you can get out of a wooded hill with like 5 movement.
Yeah, it helps a lot.
I feel like you always want a general if you're doing significant work with units beyond just defending cities.
Well, true.
I found
even more so if you're going to go out of your way to go through rough terrain.
Yeah.
Yeah, the extra one on top of your ability was should end up getting your movement to like the 4 or 5 point trigger where you can effectively do 2 rough tiles.
You're still at a big advantage in those terrains, though, because you'll often be able to attack when the opposing units cannot.
In addition to having your +5 being in there as well, like good luck getting a Vietnamese unit out of a wooded hill, especially if it's in their land.
I found myself not liking Vietnam all that much because of the district placement, but I did enjoy being able to plant forests very early. You can start planting forests at civil service, I think.
Medieval fairs, I believe.
Medieval fairs, somewhere around there.
Something
in that neighborhood. And it is true that the Thanth district is nice. It's not particularly useful unless you are going for a tourism game or a military game.
I don't know. I think it's slightly interesting in that because it doesn't count as a specialty, obviously you can throw it anywhere, and then it doesn't have the population requirement. So if you have a couple of turns, you can basically throw it down, even if it's just the base district. I mean, most of the time when I'm playing, I'm not even thinking of putting down encampments because I'm like, oh, there's lots of other more useful districts I find. But at least in this case, it's like, oh hey, okay, we can throw it down, might get some culture, and maybe down the line I can throw barracks in and get a little bit of production.
Well, it's something like, 2 culture per adjacent district, so that's like 4 times what you would get in adjacency bonus from a regular theater district. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you just want culture to go through the civics tree, like, the unique encampment is pretty darn good for that.
It's basically like bunging down a wonder and surrounding it by theater squares.
And then you build a crap ton of them, and suddenly you're popping out like every general in the game, so you'll have no shortage of generals if you're just building these things everywhere that you can.
Yeah, it's not like you can't use those both inside and outside of the rough terrain. You get the general bonus and that. So that's pretty useful. And if you're getting down into corps and armies earlier than usual, then this is actually a pretty solid military setup.
In particular, if you're getting lots of generals, you're getting more retirement benefits as well. I mean, especially since they added a few extra in this patch, there's a few that are a little less military focused and actually have a somewhat of a slight benefit.
Yeah, they tend to not be as good as like Grand Columbia's generals, but they're still pretty good.
Grand Columbia has double generals, though.
Well, yeah, but some of their generals also have like really crazy strong retirement bonuses. Like one of them is like an extra trade route and, things like that. You don't get those sorts of things from the regular generals. At least I haven't seen them.
I think one of the
Usually
new
not.
generals who is a Vietnamese general is like 25% war awareness or something. I forget what it is, but there's something that's now an interesting early general that isn't Sun Tzu. That's kind of worth getting just even purely for the retirement bonus a little later on.
Today I learned that all ancient era generals were Asian. But that's probably not surprising since Asia was settled a little earlier and also had a lot more war. So
yeah, when you think about Europe, there's very little in terms of generals until you start getting into the era of like Hannibal and Boadicea and all that, which is
Alexander.
probably
Classical stuff.
Classical early medieval sort of thing.
Well, of the major early civilizations, 4 out of 5 were in Asia. And the only one that wasn't was very Asia adjacent.
And for Egypt is an African nation only. Because that's where the capital is.
I have not played with Mongolia yet, or China as Kublai Khan. I don't remember exactly what his unique thing is. It's something to do with trade routes, right?
He gets a bonus eco slot, and then all of his when he establishes a trading post in another major civ. I think it's only major civ. I don't think it worked for him in city states, but he gets a random Eureka and inspiration. But it's only on the first establishment, so it's kind of.
Is that once per civ total?
Once per civ, yes.
Okay.
It's once per civ. It's a little somewhat limited in scope, although some could say, you're getting 8 Eurekas and inspirations for free over the course of the game, which is like, 4 techs, 4 civics, basically.
I would have to double check the in-game text, because I'm pretty sure that in most cases when Civilization 6 says civilization, it does include city-states.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I played it, so I don't recall it. Yeah, the way the text specifically says, in another civilization's city.
But then again, the text in Civ 6 isn't always great. Case in point, with Vietnam, her leader ability says all units get the combat and movement bonuses for the features, but I've been playing with them and I double-checked, and it's only land units. So naval units that bombard onto, say, a forest tile do not get the combat bonus, and air units that start their turn deployed on rough terrain or in an aerodrome that is built on rough terrain, because, you can build an aerodrome on the rough terrain, they do not get any movement or range or combat bonuses either. So I I don't know if that's a mistake in the text or if it's a bug in the way that the thing is working. I don't know which it's intended to be, but I err on the side of it's a mistake in the text.
Yeah, it's probably a text bug rather than, or UI bug rather than a mechanical bug. It would be a little odd if the act of firing into the trees was easier for Vietnamese ships or something.
Well, that's the way that it works with ranged units in general. Is it's not the unit that the ranged unit is standing on; it's the tile that it's firing into. And there's been other bonuses in the past, like rough terrain bonuses and stuff. Like some civs get bonuses for attacking onto hills or whatever. And in the case of like a crossbow, that means you can stand on a flat land and fire onto the hill, and you get the combat bonus.
Okay, but that is awkward, though.
I do think it is. I think the mechanics, yes, I think it's definitely a text thing, but mechanically, it also actually affects religious units, I found.
Oh, does it? I had not noticed that.
Yeah, I noticed that it actually affects theological combat as well, so.
I shall have to make a note of that for the strategy guide that I'm working on.
Yeah, it's a very weird, that, plus I think there's one other civ ability that actually does affect theological combat that you wouldn't think it does at first glance, but I can't remember which one it is. But yeah, I play Kublai as Mongolia just purely because, his ability synchronizes well with Mongolia's instant trading post establishment. So you can pick up your Eurikas pretty early, or pretty quickly, even though they're not going to be as powerful.
Yeah, surface reading definitely makes Kublai Khan look like he plays better with Mongolia than with China.
It's also even more fun if you're combined with the societies and Elsa Minerva, because holy, that's a lot of policy slots. Like if you could get Elsa Minerva, by the time you're already getting the first couple of, by the time you're already getting the Code of Laws, you can basically slot both of them in right away.
Then build the policy slot adders, the wonders.
And then build even more of them. Like you can have, 14, 15? It could be probably even more than that. Lots. Let's just say lots.
Did you play around with Vietnam's Voi Chien unique unit at all? Because I found that that unit's pretty boss.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I built one. I didn't use it, though.
Yeah, having the ability to move after attacking on like a crossbow unit is pretty darn powerful, and then you combine that with all the extra bonuses from like the rough terrain and stuff, especially the movement. You get that thing promoted real quick, and you get that extra combat move per turn, and like suddenly these things are better than catapults at sieging cities, because you can move in to range to bombard, and then move out so the city can't attack you, which is always the problem with catapults, is you get one shot off and then the city kills you with its bombardment, and then usually a ranged unit inside. But with these Voi Chien bad boys, like, oh man, they just destroy these cities. Like,
I feel like saying it's better than a catapult is selling a unit a little short here.
Well,
I know what you're getting at, but it just sounded funny to me.
Well, they don't do as much damage to the walls per turn, but when you're getting 2 attacks per turn and you're not taking a counterattack back, that's the net effect.
Yeah.
The Voi Chien is kind of like what the Dom Ray wishes it was.
And unlike catapults, you can actually use them against other units without wanting to, stab yourself.
Yes, actually just stabbing them as well. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I forget what it's like. I forget if it's like 3 or 4 base movement, but yeah, that and 35 strength is at 30, and all you pay is an extra, 60 gold from the purchase cost, I think, isn't it? 780 instead of 720.
Right, and they upgrade from regular archers, which means you don't have to hard train them in all your cities when you unlock them, which has been the problem with some other unique units, including I think the Domray, the other
Domray, Samurai, Kevsur, all that sort of stuff. Berserkers.
So yeah, these are. I've just been only played one game so far with Vietnam, but this unique unit has catapulted itself to being one of my favorite unique units in the game. I think it's one of the better ones for sure.
Yeah, it's early, it's strong. There's not a lot to dislike there.
There's obviously one other big thing about the patch last month that we still have to cover, and that's the brand new game mode.
Monopolies and corporations, they're fun.
They're fun and still very broken.
It's okay though, because everybody gets the broken.
Yeah, but it's the bad kind of broken. It's the You suddenly win a tourism victory within 150 turns because your luxuries are giving you a 300% tourism bonus modifier in the medieval era. Sort of broken.
How does that happen? Because I can't get corporation until much later.
But it's not even the corporation, it's just having the act of having a monopoly. Apparently it's some interesting kind of formula between number of other civs in the game that don't have access to the resource times the amount you have or something. I don't claim to know the actual formula. All we know is that it's, from what I've read around there, apparently it's hard coded and no modder is able to fix it.
Of course.
I actually tried playing this game mode this week, but unfortunately I got swarmed by like 3 barbarian outposts all around my capital city and had to abandon the game.
That's been made more fun because they reduced the anti-cav bonus to +5 and +10.
All 3 barbarian encampments spawned like within a few turns of a city-state, and their scout found that city-state and started spawning like crap tons of units, and then they all came from me.
I still think that should be considered bugged. Like, the whole point of scouting is to find where the target is.
Well, what happened was I had sent out my units to go clear the outpost, not knowing that they had scouted a city, and so I guess they just saw my units and then followed them back home, because I had to retreat.
They do have a weird attraction to the player in the game.
Yeah, I'm also on, like, Emperor difficulty, so I don't know how that affects barbarian behavior, other than that they spawn more frequently, but my suspicion is that the difficulties above, like, King also make the barbarians focus more on the player civ than on other civs. But I
wonder. I don't think that... I would be surprised if that's true. If they bothered to do different code for the barbarian unit behavior on different difficulties.
That would be hard to do.
Yeah, that's not something I'd anticipate. Now, of course, the AI with its bonuses will do much better against barbarians on the higher difficulties anyway. But if you play in Deity, then also land gets claimed so quickly that you just get, after the initial turns, you just don't get as many barbarians because there's no space.
Oh, the other thing we got was the Preserve District, which I also used a few times, and it is considerably better than we thought it might be when we talked about it like a month ago.
Funny thing is, I've built one.
I built one. I didn't like it.
Well, here's the thing. From what I can tell, it looks like their bonuses stack. So if you put preserves, in different cities, like 1 or 2 tiles apart from each other, so that they overlap 1 or 2 tiles, it looks, and then you build the grove or whatever, it looks like the yield bonuses do stack, which can get pretty good pretty quickly.
I've seen a screenshot, I think it was on Reddit, of basically someone that's managed to surround a tile with enough of them to basically have 6 of every yield.
That's pretty impressive. But it's also pretty expensive.
Yeah. There's a lot of effort involved in putting them in, and obviously appeal is something that you can only somewhat control.
Right, and to be fair, I was using them with Vietnam, so I had, like, rainforests and woods everywhere anyway, and they were buffing those tiles. So, they were already decent tiles to begin with. So, maybe not with every civilization they're quite as good. Also, I'm still not convinced that they're still a specialty district. I pretty much only put them down to play around with them and see what they did. I definitely would not be putting down a sanctuary or a preserve before, a campus or a commercial hub.
I think the only time I did build it was because of Tech and Civic Shuffle basically making it so I only really had that and something else as specialty district options. I was like, sure, whatever, throw it down.
Just put an encampment in every city. Go, go, go.
I also had one of them that was next to Natural Wonder that buffs adjacent terrain as well. So it's stacked with that too. So.
And the other thing I've seen to make them interesting is if you're playing a game, because they'll buff, because the mountains are always breathtaking.
And if you also combine them with the Governor Reyna and the Forest Management promotion that gives +2 gold on all those unimproved features, again, it is actually a considerable amount of yield, and it's you're getting it on every adjacent tile, so that's potentially up to 6 tiles Although in practice it'll probably only be more like 3 or 4 because you're usually putting them next to a mountain or something that's not workable.
Finally got the list of resource industry effects. I
Yeah, there's
noticed that a lot of the ones that are not they're not used nowadays, like tobacco, ivory, and whales, are all military unit production increases.
Yeah, some of them kind of makes it interesting how they're related. Like I can understand several of the hefty food ones being growth and housing, and diamonds are worth gold. But how do furs make civilians cheaper?
I guess because it's cheaper to make coats.
Probably.
Also,
And,
why is citrus a military unit buff?
Yeah, you'd think that would be one of the big foodie ones for.
You have to remove
housing and
scurvy.
growth.
Is it a naval unit buff, though? Because, yes,
Remove scurvy.
carrying citrus around on ships was a big deal for preventing scurvy.
Yeah.
So I
Line
could definitely see it as a naval unit buff.
Like most of them do make sense.
Incense
Although-
giving extra faith for one.
Yeah. I don't
Civ really
get
is
the-
associated that way. Like, as far back as it's had these bonuses at all. And since it's been faith related.
I'm still
Oh.
not sure why gypsum even exists in the game.
Just to have a varied quarry resource, I guess. Because it's only really that and stone that go around quarries up marble as well.
Marble seems to be very rare, though. I hardly ever find it in games, and if I do, it's like 2 sources.
Ironically, the first one I got was marble. The first, what's it called? Industry.
Man, those resources have fallen off since Civ 4. Stone
Yeah,
and
marble was
marble
a
used to
good
be
deal in Civ
ridiculous.
4.
Stone was too.
25% to wonders.
It was
Actually,
100%.
50.
50%.
Oh.
It was 100% to some wonders.
I think Civ 5 just made it so that marble gave you a bonus production towards any wonder. It was a much smaller bonus, but it was for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, the economics were such in 4 that you would intentionally fail wonders for gold because the hammer investment was so good if you had multiple wonder boosters. Like if you had marble and industrious, you could get a lot of money just starting junk wonders and not finishing them.
All right. I think we can move on to the next topic, which is the next month patch that we're going to get.
This one looks fun.
Yes, indeed. Although I haven't seen, I've seen the video. I haven't seen like specific numbers attached to this. I don't know if we have those yet.
We don't have them yet, I don't believe.
So we've got Barbarian Clans mode, improvement to AI handling of aircraft, leader selection pool, natural wonder reworks and rebalance, and government policy card slot changes are the 5 things announced. Barbarian Clans sounds interesting, and we're going to get the reintroduction of barbarians eventually founding cities with that.
Yes, it
So
seems
that's
that if they reform, they'll form a new city-state. But one
Yeah.
that's already from the existing pool of city-states. I'm not sure if the type is directly related. The only example I think we got was a camp turning into Valletta. So I'm not sure if they'll always become militaristic city-states or if it's just completely random and that was just what happened to spawn that time.
I wonder if it's based on like how you interact with them. Like maybe if you're giving them a lot of money, bribing them to go away or to attack other players, maybe they become mercantile.
That would be cool. I mean, they are introducing the ability to speed up their creation of cities, so it would make sense if the way you interact with them would influence what they develop into.
We did get clarification in the social media post that if the number of city-states allowed is already maxed, barbarians cannot add to that number.
Ah, okay, so that was a technical consideration. I think I'd brought that up at one point, that was the way that Civ 5 worked, is there was a limit to how many civs and city-states could be in the game, and I assumed Civ 6 worked the same, which is why we've seen this proposed by people since city-states came out for Civ 5, and it was just never technically feasible before because of the way the game worked on the back end, but...
Limit is, 24, I think? Is it?
I think it's 20. or at least it was in Civ 5, 23, 22, something.
I think like default it's always 1.5 times the number of players, but I think the max is the max was 24 because it was
Yeah.
like double the 12.
Yeah, there was a hard-coded max in there somewhere, and it was something like 24 or 32 or something like that.
That makes you wonder what would be the ideal amount of city-states to start with if you're playing with barbarian clans.
Yeah.
We don't know how much buffer there is.
Well, it should depend on the number of civs in your difficulty level too, I would imagine, because you only get so many barbarian encampments before the land gets settled.
There's also the thought of if an AI defeats a city-state, which they sometimes still do, and take it over, would then they be able to? Would the bards be able to add another city-state to the list? But does then that ruin things if you try and liberate the previous city-state?
Yeah, I would assume that you can't add an extra bar because of the fact that city-state could be liberated. Like, what would happen to that city-state then if you liberated it? Would it just disappear? Turn back into barbarians?
Crash the game? Yeah. It probably treats the Civ as still existing in terms of the city-state.
I would think it would have to.
They did show us the interactions we could have with the barbarian clans, and there's an interesting mix. Like, obviously, the obligatory pay them off to attack someone. Who knows if that'll work as well as bribing AI?
You can buy their best unit, and since they are supposedly going to get random unique units from civs that are not in the game, that could occasionally be interesting, as you might get your hands on something pretty good, depending.
Now,
like an Eagle Warrior.
Did it confirm that you permanently get that unit, or is it like levying a city-state where you get it for like 20 turns or whatever?
They weren't clear on that.
It looked like it's going to be a permanent thing, because I think again, obviously these numbers are subject to being tweaked, and it was just for the showcase of the dev diary, but I think they paid like nearly 160 or 180 gold or something and got the Eagle Warrior, and it has a cooldown like every 10 turns or something. So
yeah, usually when you levy a city-state unit, there's a little like clock icon above the unit flag that shows that it's a temporary unit, and I do not recall seeing that in the video dev update, so I'm assuming you permanently get the unit, but I don't know for sure.
I'm under the impression it is, especially because it spawns it directly in your territory. So I think it would count as your unit and be based on the city it would spawn in. It would also get the bonuses from an encampment or everything else that's placed in there.
I don't know if they said there's going to be a developer stream this week or not. Usually they do, but then again, it was out on Thursday. Today's the Saturday before, so
who knows? I suppose the other interesting thing about this clans vote is if you were to play it, what's then the best tactic? Do you want them to turn into city-states for trade routes and envoys, or do you want to kill them for gold and prestige and all that other fun stuff and being like, rawr, I'm smashing bards, yay.
I wonder if you could get them to form a city-state and just immediately shank them to get a city. That might be useful.
It's an interesting toss, especially, I guess it would depend on how many units they end up spawning. Like, what if the Barb clan basically keeps all their units as soon as they turn into a city-state?
Yeah, that could be a little bit more challenging then.
Yeah. Or would it just spawn with the default? I think it's, 2 or 3 warriors that a city-state gets? Or base units?
How long does it take to become a city-state? Because it depends on their civilization level, or their civilized level. And question becomes, is it cheaper to just build a settler and get rid of it than just wait till the Valera when it's finally done?
Well, I mean, you could do both, so...
Yeah, plant the settler somewhere else, unless you're out of room.
Or if for some reason some other civ comes along and says, hey, I'm going to eat this.
Yeah, well, there's always that risk, too. But that might be a good thing. You'd have to evaluate the situation, depending on where the barb camp is located and how quickly you can get stuff settled versus like rushing out of their civs versus whatever. To not always handle them the same way. It could be.
I guess maybe it would be better to, fix city-state interactions such that we can actually defend our city-states rather than adding more.
Well, that would be nice too, yes. I would like to see that in the base game, though, not in Barbarian Clans mode, but just as something we can always do. If somebody is attacking our city-state, that we have some say in what happens there.
And we can't and we can actually do something before they get captured.
Yes.
And also so that we don't have to go to full war to defend them either. That would be nice.
And get a bunch of grievances and warmonger hate.
Yeah, while defending somebody from an attack, you get grievances and warmonger. It's kind of ridiculous.
I mean, Civ 5 didn't really do it particularly well when they just gave you a leader pop-up every time one of them attacked your city-state. But at least they gave you something.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a notification, on the side. Like, I think Beyond Earth did that for things like declaration or certain diplomatic messages. Instead of just popping up the full-screen leader screen in the middle of the, CPU turns, they would appear as notifications on the side of the screen that you would click on when you wanted to see it, or just dismiss them because you don't care.
The main issue as well, it does do that in 6. It's only as a tiny thing of you've earned grievances because someone declared on your friend/city state, and it's very easy to overlook that.
Yeah, there really needs to be like a better event log that it makes it easier to keep track of all this stuff.
I think they added one finally.
There is, but I think I've tried using it, and I don't know, maybe I have to try it again and look at it some more, but I'm just never impressed with it.
I'm not impressed with the whole icons on the side either, because sometimes they just don't go away.
Yeah,
like,
UI stuff in general, well,
a lot of them you have to
plenty.
manually dismiss, yeah.
I like the design of the UI. It just needs more functionality. Like, it needs to actually work and not be as obtuse as it is.
Yeah, and when there's a lot of notifications like that, it would be nice to just have like a screen that you can pop up that just shows them all in a list instead of having to hover over the icon to see what each and every one of them means.
Yeah.
Or maybe a shortcut key that you hold, like you hold the shift key or something, and the text pops up on all of them.
Or maybe make the icon distinctive of what happened, as opposed to just a picture of the same thing every time. Like, I liked how Civ 5 did it better, even though it was more obtrusive on the eyes. But you could always tell from a glance what actually happened, because if it was a Civ that did something, it showed the flag of that Civ next to whatever happened. And if it was like a declaration of war, it would say X has declared on X with a sword between both flags. So, and you could see that without having to wander over the thing and see the text. And I wish they did that in Civ 6 too, because that was better.
Civ 6 is just somebody declared war on somebody, maybe, somewhere.
Which, to be honest, if it says somebody has declared war on an unmet civilization, I shouldn't be seeing that.
Well,
because I should not know about that.
If you know one civilization or the other, I guess it's relevant. But yeah, if you're playing on continents and it happens on the other continent where you haven't met either, then yeah, we probably don't need that notification.
Well, then there's also the fact that sometimes it's just the city-states that happens to.
An unmet civilization has been destroyed.
But who were they? Will we ever find out?
It was just Carthage.
Again.
Again.
Because they built too many birenes and not enough land units.
So guys, what do you think is the over-under on AI handling of aircraft actually being something resembling competent?
Well, if they actually build them and use them, that's like an infinite % improvement.
That's true, but that doesn't make it good.
I have seen one AI airplane before.
Yeah, me too. I even talked about it on the show. It was like my big announcement for the week. I saw an AI air unit.
Well, that's what that's why I'm saying this, right? Like, the idea of improving AI handling of aircraft is a very low bar, so that you don't need to do very much to say that you have improved it.
A 100% increase would be seeing 2 planes. So yeah.
I mean, honestly,
yeah,
I would be content if all the AI is doing is just building the darn things, so that at least when I'm bombing them back into the Stone Age, I get intercepted from time to time. Like, for me, that's all it needs.
It did show them using the planes, so maybe that'll be okay. I suspect having anti-air will be good enough against the AI, but we'll see.
Anti-air is pretty good if you are actually fighting planes.
Yeah.
Because if your ally has anti-air, it will shoot down your planes too. Because there's a bug.
I just don't want to be able to like conquer an entire AI civilization because I have one bomber.
That would take too long.
Build
Ain't no one got time for that crap. But yeah, and I know what you mean.
Well, I mean, there's land units too, but you've got a bomber taking out a third of the city's defenses in like one turn, and there's absolutely no resistance to it from the AI.
Thunderbolt.
Whatever. I feel like the late game AI is like that regardless, because you can just fire at it with artillery
From off screen.
Yeah,
Kill
like you kill
artillery.
its units with artillery, and then you shoot at its cities, which can't shoot back. And once they have enough, like once you have them as armies with enough promotions and a general, they just melt cities. It's disgusting. And like anytime the AI musters another unit, it'll move it close by, and you can just like shred it in one turn, and still have some firepower left over to unload on the cities. It's pretty disgusting once you're leveled up like that.
That's late game lightning warfare for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so like unless the AI air power is enough that is threatening that despite investing in some anti-air, it probably won't be too scary, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, one of the biggest threats of air units is that they're like one of the few unit types that's actually allowed to stack. So you're potentially having something like, 3 or 4 fighters or bombers in one city at a time, which can all make their ranged attack in the same turn, as opposed to a land unit, which, you've got maybe one ranged unit or one siege unit in there, and, maybe if it's a coastal city, you can throw a naval unit in there too for an extra bombardment. If the AI is actually putting them in their cities and using them either offensively or defensively, that's a lot of extra bombardment against your invading artillery. And they'll actually have the range to hit your artillery, too.
Yeah.
Didn't I tweak the airplane stacking not too long ago? Like, I know originally, like, at launch air drones used to be able to hold up to 8, and nowadays I think it's only 4, and it's like 1 in a city.
It's I think it's 3 or 4. I think it's 1 or 2 in a city and like 3 or 4 in an aerodrome, and I think an airstrip is 3. I could be wrong, but you can also build the hangar and airport, which increases the capacity. So
I wonder if they're going to mess with what happens when you capture an aerodrome with hostile planes in there.
Oh, here's a suggestion for Firaxis. I don't know if this is going to be in the update, but it would be nice if aircraft carriers could have an opportunity to gain experience for a change. Maybe aircraft carriers should get like a small amount of the experience that the air units that launch from the carrier receive. That way you don't have to throw your aircraft carrier into the front lines and let it tank attacks just to get some experience and, promote it for a change.
What promotions does it even get?
Well, one of them is really good. One of the Tier 1 promotions is extra unit capacity, so it increases from 2 planes to 3 planes.
There's also there's also a late one, which is basically all aircraft that are based on this carrier also heal every turn. I think that's like the Tier 4 promotion.
Yeah,
which good luck getting
it, but yeah, that's quite useful.
I think the only time I ever get promotions on an aircraft carrier is when I burn an admiral that has the benefit of giving the unit a promotion, and I use that on the carrier.
Yeah, that's a really good use for that.
It makes you think of in Civ 5. I think in Civ 5 the carrier's only promotion was like armor plating for just defense.
I think it had movement speed too, I think.
Yeah, it probably did, yeah. The usual stuff like supply and movement, but otherwise it was just more defense, more defense, more defense.
Well, in Civ 5, if I recall correctly, the aircraft carriers at least could attack. Like, they weren't particularly great on attack, but if you've got, an enemy caravel, sitting around, yeah, sure, go ahead and sink it with your carrier. Get some free experience. Like, in Civ 6, I'm pretty sure the carriers are defensive only, so you can't even do that.
I don't think I've ever built a carrier in Civ 6.
I think I've built them a couple of times and only ever really used them to bring stealth bombers to the other side of the map to drop thermal nukes.
Yeah, the few times I've done naval games, I just won with battleships because they're so good.
I didn't know you could put bombers on a carrier in Civ 6.
But now maybe if the AI is using planes, then it would behoove you to have some fighters for intercepting. Since I don't think you're going to be putting anti-air guns from land into your boats and having them shoot down aircraft in the water.
Well, theoretically, that's what your missile cruisers are doing.
Yeah. Once you have them.
We have destroyers for that. But I
I
guess-
guess destroyers do have some anti-air. They're not very good at it, though, are they?
55, I think, isn't it?
I don't know. I've never had an opportunity to test it.
Yeah,
Me
Doesn't have
either.
any air.
yeah. I've never actually had opposing hostile skies.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure both destroyers and battleships and also missile carriers have inherent anti-air interception functionality. Is it just anti-air when they're attacked, or do they actually intercept attacks on adjacent tiles as well?
I think they all intercept at a range of 1. I think the only unit that does 2 is probably the mobile SAM support unit, but I could be wrong.
And how does overlapping anti-air work on the ground?
I think it's just one
Who knows?
attack
One
at
goes?
a time. Yeah. Take turns.
Hmm.
So if there's multiple attacks on that tile, then each, anti-air, makes one interception.
Okay, and they're limited in the number of interceptions they get per turn.
And one of the things that I believe they are. I think it's just 1 or 2 interceptions per turn. One of the things that I also hope is that I hope that the naval unit's anti-air capability does not end up being too strong. So if it is already strong, I kind of hope that they nerf it so that having aircraft carriers and air support on sea becomes more, valuable.
Yeah, I don't know how you can model it compared to how actual history handled naval aviation in World War II and such. Because there were places that ships just wouldn't go because the threat of naval bombers was too high. But at the same time, Civ just doesn't model that on scale in a way that it would make sense. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want navies to be completely helpless to air power either. But maybe if air power is heavy, you really should need some fighters on Interceptor or something.
Right, but at the same time, I don't want it to be trivially easy for your Navy to defend itself from attacking aircraft because they all have anti-air capabilities. The planes can't hit submarines, I think, to begin with, so you're only attacking destroyers and battleships and carriers, which have built-in anti-air. So, that's my theory, is that you end up just having so much anti-air capability on the ships themselves that attacking them with airplanes just isn't viable.
I feel like, at minimum, bombers should be able to hit subs.
And I could be
I
mistaken.
think it's kind of ridiculous they can't.
Maybe planes in Civ 6 can hit subs. Maybe I'm thinking of Axis and Allies rules. But like I said, I've never seen it in Civ 6 against the AI, so I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't tested these interactions much at all. But they're it is against history that planes are not a threat to subs. They really should be able to hit them.
Well,
if they're spotted, of course.
My understanding historically is that planes were used for spotting subs, but then they actually had to send a destroyer over to drop the depth charges to actually destroy it.
Torpedo bombers could be a threat because subs spent the vast majority of their time, especially the World War II subs, they spent the vast majority of their time on the surface. So not only could they be spotted, but they could be hit.
Yeah, you do a strafing run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the bombing wasn't that sophisticated back then. If you're using a torpedo bomber, you're probably doing something that resembles a strafing run. And submarine anti-air was limited. They could kind of shoot at a plane or something, but they're probably not gonna challenge that.
It's one of the things that probably doesn't work on the scale of a Civilization game, but it would be interesting if subs in the game actually did have to submerge and come up to the surface. They had a charge timer or something on them for how many turns they could be under the water before they had to come up, and they were visible to all units and susceptible to air attack and other sources of bombardment.
Yeah, I think it should just be a matter of spotting them. The idea sounds cool, but it just doesn't work when a turn is a year or something. It's kind of weird.
And speaking of subs, my experience also has been that the AI doesn't build them very often, so it would be nice if the AI would build more subs.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple. I think it's just based so they usually tend to focus their oil more on tanks and stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think they also don't build very many privateers. They focus mostly on caravels and frigates, so they don't have the privateers to upgrade to subs, and if they do, they usually get killed before they can upgrade to subs. Because the AI just does not build very many units after the medieval era in general. So any new unit types that pop up after that just don't show up very often because the AI never builds them.
Unless they have the Cultist Society and then they suddenly have 100 of those.
Well, yeah, unless you're playing with the alternate game rules.
Yeah.
What do you mean? The most pure version of Civ is all game rules active.
Oh God,
Oh dear.
that would be a fiesta for sure. Well, speaking of game roles, the leader selection poll is just a nice, convenient feature to have. Yeah, it's been requested several times. You can just say, "Yeah, I don't want some of these people," or "I want only from this list," etc.
No.
It's actually very robust from what I saw. You
Yeah.
can set multiple different pools that have different options based on what you want to see. Like you can make a pool of only aggressive leaders and a pool of only peaceful leaders, and you can put separate pools in different slots in the game.
Now, my big question is this leader pool only for opponent AI civilizations, or could you set this up for, like, your own random picker? Because the thing I've complained about many times in the past is I don't want to play as these civilizations because I've already played them. I want a random civ that I haven't played with yet.
This looks like it could handle it. This looks better than I would have expected for a mechanic like this. So I'm pretty impressed by the selection pool that they're showing off.
It's almost Steam Workshop mod quality. That's it. I mean, there's good ones on the workshop, so.
Oh yeah. For any particular game, like the very best mods tend to be just freaking amazing. As long as it's a sufficiently popular game.
Which one are you talking about? Are you talking about the one in Hearts of Iron or the one in U4?
I think the tip-top mods in both cases are very impressive. But I've also heard a lot of good things about the Total War games before that got submarined by the company. For example, some of the mod maps and mods for Dominions are just excellent. Like, pretty much any game I've played recently that has mods be a viable thing, so like not like Rocket League or something, they've just been great. Now there's just like tons and tons of garbage, but if you sift through it, at the top of the pool, the best modders are really good. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame Rocket League doesn't exist anymore.
I have the grandfathered in experience with that, man. Screw Epic.
I'm curious, what did Epic do to Rocket League?
They bought it and then took it off of Steam and made everybody who had it play on a Steam server, on an Epic server, and have an Epic account, which means China has all their information.
Those bastards.
Yeah, pretty much.
I never played it, but I had several friends who did, so that's a bummer for them.
Yeah.
Well, you can always tell which game developers don't think their game is very good because they go with Epic exclusivity. Because they don't think they can make their money back.
It's probably the point where we should point out that I think it might be clear where we've played Civ 6.
Yeah, we didn't let somebody take the food out of the developers' children's mouths.
We're all on
We
the
paid
Switch.
for our games.
Yeah. Damn Epic.
So I don't know what natural wonder reworks and rebalance means in totality.
They literally just showed one thing, and it was the Cliffs of Dover buff.
Yeah, pretty
That was
much.
Trying very hard to make it not suck.
At least the citizen that works it can now feed itself.
I liked the tone of that announcement, which was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, we fixed Cliffs of Dover, now sit down and shut up.
Pretty much.
They added adjacency for Great Barrier Reef to the campus, finally.
Yes,
Oh
finally.
yeah, I forgot that wasn't a base game thing. I've had that as a mod for so long.
That should have been the case even before they added regular reefs that give campus adjacency, like...
Well,
it was kind of weird that the regular reefs did, but Great Reefs didn't.
It was even more odd, especially because Great Barrier Reef is now listed as appears as a reef. So you'd think it would have automatically had the reef effect.
Now, the question, though,
not.
is how often can you actually get a campus adjacent to the Great Barrier Reef? Because isn't there always one water tile between the land and the Great Barrier Reef?
No, I thought it was always adjacent.
Oh, I'm thinking of the Galapagos Islands.
Yeah, Galapagos are spread out. I've actually had a Bermuda Triangle that, well, I don't know if this was base game or because of a mod, but it actually appeared on the coast.
What's the yield for that?
Base game, it's +5 science to all adjacent tiles.
Oh my goodness.
Terra Mirabilis nerfed it to hell.
I can see why they did.
Yeah, I think it's now just 1 food, 1 gold, 1 science to adjacent. in the mod. So I'm wondering if they're going to end up doing a nerf like that for the base game, or if they're just going to leave it as this super broken, but very rarely can you use it sort of natural wonder. Kind of like Krakatoa.
I was going to mention Krakatoa.
Oh yeah, speaking of mods, Civ 5 had some excellent ones too, including the AI mod.
So did Civ 4.
Oh yeah,
I never
Civ 4
get
had
into
some
Civ
amazing
5
stuff.
mods.
For as much as I played Civ 4, I never did give their mods much of a look, because that was before it was as convenient to install mods generally. That's something I put on, like unaltered gameplay, like the UI mods and stuff, the Hall of Fame mod in particular, and so on. But yeah, I didn't like check out any of the total conversion mods, but stuff like Fall from Heaven was very well reputed.
You should try Fall from Heaven too, because it's got the kind of thing that you would like. It's got some Dominions kind of stuff in it.
Hellblade Sonic Heights, let's go.
Well, there's a Doomsday counter in it, if that makes you feel any better.
Yeah, okay. It's called
And
Cataclysm in Dominions, but yeah.
some nations get bonuses to getting that pushed up, and some have bonuses to keeping it down. And if you push it up too high, disasters start happening. That kind of. But you also have evil religions in that.
Of course. Well, evil religions is basically anybody else's.
Oh, it's the Sanguine Pact.
I wonder if. Nope, not going to make that question. Go on. Ignore me.
Also, government policy card slot changes. I don't know.
We don't know
to
yet.
what extent they're going with that.
Nobody
We don't know yet.
about it, so
Yeah.
Speculation? Nah.
we'll find out next week.
It did sound
Yeah, presumably they're changing it so that it's more like you would expect. But yeah, I don't know what
That's
that
exactly
actually
what they
means.
said.
I'm guessing if maybe they made it so that like autocracy has oligarchy has the combat bonus and also more military policy slots, so that you actually use it for warmongering.
Whereas autocracy should get the stuff that was Roman.
If you were doing a rush, the oligarchy bonus was worth even more than the military slots
Kind of
in the early game.
I'm kind of halfway joking here, but I almost feel like autocracy should just be 4 wildcard slots. I mean, you are like the absolute ruler after all.
You can do whatever you want.
But anyway, yeah, we'll find out more about that next week.
I wonder if that would make me use it. Probably not. I'd probably just go oligarchy and kill things still. But, it's an option.
Anyway, sticking with the topic of balance changes, Phyrexis also announced, or at least it was reported on gaming sites, that the April update is going to rebalance, what do they say, 2/3 of all of the civilizations in the game. I'm assuming those are mostly going to be like legacy civs from Vanilla and Rise and Fall and stuff like that. I unless they're nerfing some of the newer ones, but I don't know. I would assume they're probably going to be buffing the old ones.
That's usually the direction power creep goes.
I think it's probably the most sensible option to be buffing them, because I suppose it's more a case of if you try and nerf the newer ones, then you're kind of, in theory, you're mostly taking away their unique playstyle and basically making them generic.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to go the other way of power creeping.
Yeah, and that's how most games goes. I would be surprised if we don't see it here too. And then there'll be a new worst civ, like always. But
maybe it will suddenly be Grand Columbia.
Who knows? Who knows? Spain might finally be useful.
Oh,
Spain is great.
Poor Spain.
I just love it when I join a turncast and somebody rolls Spain. Like, its entire existence is justified listening to the disgust over randoming Spain.
Nothing against our Spanish listeners. We just don't like them in game.
Well, it's not a strong civilization in the game, yeah.
Since there are so many other civs that have the same effects but better.
I wonder if England will change 2 more times before this happens, because I always feel like whenever they rebalance old civs, England is always the one that has their unique ability just completely replaced.
Yeah, they have had it happen twice, haven't they?
At least.
Yeah.
Over on Civ Fanatics user Insidious Mage has been asking the question of whether game modes should become a recurring feature for the Civilization series. Given that these recent updates from the New Frontier Pass have been adding all of these fancy new optional game modes, is this kind of now expected from major Civilization releases in the future that they come with these optional things that you can toggle on and off right at the start?
Before we say yes or no, I would like to point out that game modes is a recurring feature already in mainline Civ games, even dating back to Civ 2.
Yep.
In a way, yeah.
Does anybody remember Regicide?
Like, they had total conversion modes in Civ 2, and they also had game modes in Civ 4.
Now, are you talking about the included scenarios or modifiers for the regular game?
I'm talking about like the scenarios themselves. Like you had like some XCOM crossover stuff in Civ 2, even.
Well, that's the difference. Like those are probably considered, full scenarios and total conversion mods, whereas these are like minor optional game choices that have
I guess
not quite a significant impact on the game, but at least they change a few things around that you might not necessarily want to have them all the time.
The big difference.
Well, okay, but then where do you draw the line between something like corporations mode versus just ticking off barbarians and having a no barbarians mode?
Well, there's that, but it is different than a total conversion mod or scenario because you're not like modularly picking multiple scenarios that all, work simultaneously. So I think there's definitely a hard line between those two things. Now, the difference between these game modes and, just options in the game setup is a little bit fuzzier.
Yeah.
Well, remember, Civ 4 and previous Civs also had things like Raging Barbarians and no tech trades and things like that.
Toggle on vassal states versus not. My gosh, did that change the game? Probably more than some of the Civ 6 game modes changed the game.
Yeah,
that was just a checkbox.
That particular checkbox would definitely be on par with any of the game modes in Civ 6 for sure.
There was also a no corporations option. There was a what was it? Random leaders and civilization. So that
unrestricted too.
Unrestricted leaders is what I was talking about. And then you had what was the one? Always war.
Yeah, there was always war. I think there was
nasty.
Also an always peace. And I think there was also there was a thing where you could have peace for like the first X turns, and
there was also a forced one city challenge, which changed your national wonder rules and just didn't let you capture or found new cities.
And then in previous games before that, in Civ 3, I know there was a regicide mode, which you have a king, and if he dies, you lose.
Yep.
And there were lots of things like that.
And then there were also modifiers like where, like total elimination or whatever, where not only do you have to kill all the other players' cities, but you have to track down every one of their units in order to remove them from the game. Otherwise, you just
miss that.
You'd have stray units floating around the map from civilizations that don't exist anymore. Usually, my experience would be they would just park in the snow caps somewhere and just sit there for the rest of the game. So yeah, it was a total crap, like pointless modifier, but it was there.
My history of playing RTS games, that was annoying.
Yeah.
I don't know if searching a map of Command...
Oh, go ahead. No,
I've had enough of searching a map of Command and Conquer for the last AI harvester or light infantry that went to the top left corner of the map.
It was so appreciated when they added they don't have resource or worker producing structure any longer. So we're just going to reveal all their buildings. That was a good idea by Blizzard back in the day.
I remember Star Wars Empire at War did that too. That's one of the only RTSs that I've played recently. Or relatively recently. That was 20 years ago, but...
That was a good game.
No, 15 years ago. Oh, I'm getting old enough to remember how many decades it was. Oh my god.
I'll think about that.
Anyway, on the topic... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So on the topic of whether or not game modes should continue to exist, I think that's a resounding yes.
I have one caveat, and that is as long as it does not completely replace full expansion packs. Because I like the Civilization expansion pack model. Like, every expansion that I've played for a Civilization game since Civilization 4, I thought has been really good. So I hope they do not stop doing full expansions and instead just replace them with these modular game modes.
Yeah, and to what degree they should be modular is a point of debate too. I saw some discussion about that in the thread, but it's nice to have toggleable options that you can change whether they're in the game or not, because they still, I mean, yeah, they don't interact as much as if they were all fully integrated, but you can still have quite a bit of interaction between modular mechanics in principle. And I would say Civ 6 does a reasonable job with a lot of their stuff in practice that makes it into the base game as toggleable options, to the extent that it would be interesting to see some of these game modes interact more. I like the idea of something like Vassal States being a toggle option more than having it be a separate game mode that you can't also enable, like Barbarian Clans or something.
I forget, can you disable
Are you actually saying you want Vassal States back?
I was giving it as an example.
I was going to say, you've been very vocal about Vassal States over the years.
Well, here's the thing. Capitulation vassals could be annoying, but they were also very convenient. Peace vassals had no place in the game with the way they were implemented. So, do I want Vassal States back? Possibly, but with a pretty heavy rework from what we had back then. Just like you could put something in the game again and call it the Apostolic Palace. Just don't make it work like Civ 4s, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, talking about like expansion mechanics that are toggleable, like, you know, Gathering Storm, you can basically turn disasters off, and that's like the big, you know, cover feature of the entire expansion.
I feel like turning disasters off is kind of cheap, but then again, I enjoy weather, so...
Well, I don't know if they go all the way off, or if they just go to, like, a minimum setting. I forget whether there is
a minimum,
0.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes down to 1, but at that point, it's, like...
This is 0.
Pretty much a moot consideration in the game.
They go between 0 and 4, and so obviously 3 and 4 is when it starts really going mental.
As someone who really likes the apocalypse mode, I personally love heavy weather. It makes you not want to settle on rivers.
One of the problems that I had with Vietnam in the game that I've been playing this past 2 weeks or so has been, because I have so many more woods and rainforests all over the place, my districts keep catching on fire and burning down.
Yeah.
The entire empire is on fire at once. It's a shame. It's a shame you were playing Vietnam and not Australia.
Yeah, when global warming started kicking in, and I'm at like level 3 or 4 of global warming in the game, like I have like the entire core of my civilization right now is like on fire.
At certain times of the year, it's also like California, but...
Yeah, my Vietnamese civilization has turned into Southern California in my current Civ 6 game.
And here we have a satellite view of the Vietnamese Empire. Oh, it's a ball of fire.
See, I don't like the degree of RNG some of that stuff introduces. Because at some point it starts being more decisive than your choices.
Well,
so yeah, I like that it's an option that you can pick where you want where you want the game to handle it into your preferences.
To the game's credit and to your point, in the game's defense, I am burning like 2/3 of the world's fossil fuels. I was burning like 2,000 units of fossil fuels per turn or something like that. Compared to like a few hundred from each of the other civilizations, so it was kind of my fault.
Well, all right, if you're like intentionally wrecking the world, it's fine, whatever.
It wasn't really intentional, it was just the fact that I own like half of the world's landmass, so, and I had a lot of industrial hubs all over the place, and was like, oh, I'll just build some, coal and oil factories, like what could go wrong? And like before I knew it, global warming was just completely out of control. And there was like I'm doing carbon recapture.
Brings results.
Yeah, I'm doing.
If you have that many cities, it's not going to influence the outcome of the game any longer either, though.
No, yeah, you're right. At this point, it is just an inconvenience, but it's it's kind of funny.
Yeah. What I really hated about it, like in the Civ 4 days, is that if you got the wrong kinds of events early, not just the Vietagarians, and that's the poster child for it, because that could just kill you without any recourse. But even when they patched that, you could still get a sequence of events that effectively ruined your opening and cost you like a huge amount of time. More than the difference between a good versus great player, just on events alone. And that's a bit extreme. I don't like to see that kind of stuff in the game.
Yeah, like having your library burned down
20.
or something like that.
Yeah, or like you get the
blizzard.
equivalent of like chain whipping your capital due to forest fires, and there's like nothing you could do about it.
See, I don't mind it so much in Civ 6 because there are underlying mechanics that cause the disasters. So there's a lot more perceivable consequence behind them. And I also don't mind them as much because they start out really benign and almost trivial to deal with. And they progressively get more disruptive as the game goes on. So,
yeah, the design of them is much better in Civ 6 than 4.
And going back to our previous point about things like Vassals in the Apostolic Palace, we're okay with these sorts of mechanics coming back as long as you make them not suck anymore.
And they have the slider for disaster, so you can put it where you want it. Like
Right,
it's as good as I could ask for a mechanic like
Civ
that.
4, where it was turn disaster or random events on or off. You know, there was no toggles or no sliders for severity or anything like that. It was just they're on or they're off.
And no sanity checking for impact on the game. Whereas in Civ 6, if you're playing with like modest disasters or whatever, the odds of you getting completely hosed by a single event pretty remote, especially since a lot of them are constrained by terrain choices. So you're even further having agency on how they interact with you.
Yeah, if you
that just wasn't there previously.
Yeah, if you settled next to a volcano or floodplains and you have districts destroyed by that volcano or those floodplains, that is as much on you as it is on the RNG.
You don't have to put the districts on the floodplains either. That's at least not before you put the dam up or whatever.
Well, that's also true. Right, so yeah, like you said, the player has a lot of agency in just how impactful these disasters are going to be.
Yeah. So anyway, the long and short of it is, I don't know that I like dedicated game modes that are exclusive to the rest of the content, but game modes themselves are cool and have been with the Civ franchise for a long time.
Yeah, it's just now they're being marketed differently.
At least one thing they've done that's nice with this section is they have a nice split between, some things that are barely modifiers and some things that are almost like full fantasy, like Heroes and Legends.
Yeah.
Secret societies, that sort of stuff. But, it's okay to have fun and have, weird thoughts. Civ doesn't have to be all 100% realistic.
Yeah, and I'm happy
we can have our own fantasies of great men of history and women.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to finally see the historic game modes that they promised when all of this started, finally starting to come out, because I was actually starting to get a little bit worried here that they weren't going to be as historic as they promised, because I wasn't totally keen on, the fantasy, vampires and zombies and stuff like that in the game, but now the corporations in this barbarian game mode, these are the two that I have, the most interest in, and I will actually probably play these quite a bit.
Heroes and Legends is pretty fun.
Death.
Oh, Red Death.
Now that's a different kind of game mode, and we don't talk about that.
Well, I mean, you got to have a battle royale. I mean, that's the big hit these days. Sigh.
As long as there's not loot boxes.
Don't say that. You know what's going to happen.
I would not be surprised if we don't get some sort of a skin system for leaders. But...
Firax is purchased by Epic Games.
And here's a big thing for me as well, is if they're able to sell these micro game modes, and that means that they don't start putting in cosmetics and loot boxes and all these 99-cent microtransactions, then yes, definitely they are absolutely worth it if it avoids those things. But at the same time, I also worry about the slippery slope. They're like, oh, well, these little micro game modes are successful. We should put more of them in the game. And then, before you know it, we have, like Canus said, leader skins on sale for 99 cents a piece. And who knows, maybe regional unit skins on sale for 99 cents a piece. And, there's all kinds of things that I can imagine that they could do that I absolutely do not want them to do.
You think unit skins will be sold for $1?
Yeah, you're right. You're probably for
$9.99. Laughs at you.
But...
Yeah, judging by what some other companies do, yeah. Just wait for the 2K Epic merger, then we'll see plenty.
Well, the only thing I think...
Don't ever say such a horrible thing. Never.
And then those two can also merge with Electronic Arts.
Oh, you're giving me a heart attack.
All right, Phil, stop killing Canus.
Yeah, I don't want to see this crap either.
Especially because there's still a topic to introduce.
Still two, if we can get to them.
Who's the next producer? It's me, isn't it?
It is.
It is me. Irrational district placements for aesthetic reasons. This is a thread by, as soon as it opens, I'll tell you. An enemy?
And on cross an enemy, I think.
Ah, that would be good. Okay, so this person wants to know how many players put places in irrational places because they look cool. For instance, an oracle next to a holy unit with a holy site with a shrine, or a Venetian arsenal or Broadway next to a city center. Entertainment complex next to a water park, or a spaceport next to an aerodrome.
I think most people can guess my answer to this thread.
No.
Aesthetics? Question mark?
What, you don't like you don't like this hodgepodge of like about 20 districts just all smushed together?
Oh, if I can make like an awful Eldritch Horror of checker mark bullcrap, then yeah. But that's assuming I'm not just building more encampments and units.
So we look over at your empire and all we see are nameplates because of all of the cities and encampments.
I mean, look at all the 5 swordsman wonders.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, I also build range units, and eventually, later on, siege.
They just built a battering ram and went to town.
So, what you're saying is you would build the statue of Zeus?
If I'm not too busy, yeah, I'm building units to rush somebody out. It's hard to get wonders like that.
The statue of Zeus gives you 1 units.
Yeah, but it's hard to get it reliably when you need it for early wars on high difficulties. Like, it's not reliable enough for my tastes, to put it mildly.
It also has to be on flat land as well, doesn't it? Which makes it even more of a pain, because usually you might be putting the encampment on a hill.
Yeah. Yeah, and you want that classical / medieval general. If you're going for an early war against an AI, you really need that. It makes a big difference. If you're stacking that with oligarchy, you can actually overcome the AI bonuses, especially if they don't pick oligarchy.
Yeah, I definitely do take aesthetics into consideration when I'm, planning districts and stuff, but like very rarely to the point where that supersedes like the actual like yields or whatever that I'm going to get out of them.
Just be a robotic optimizer. It's the most fun, quote unquote.
I find optimization to be the most boring kind of problem.
Yeah, unfortunately. Sometimes that's true.
But yeah, I will sit sometimes for like several minutes like debating on which side of the wonder I want to build my theater square on. Because which side will it look better on?
Now that is so foreign to me. I can't remember the last time I placed a district or made choices in other games where if that even entered my frame of mind.
Well, for the most
I was
part,
thinking something.
For the most part, placement something like that is largely dictated by like the actual game state, where it's like there's the adjacencies mean I'm going to put it in a particular place because that's where it's going to get the most adjacency. But every now and then there's a situation where it could go in like one of 2 or 3 places and it would be functionally identical or like so similar like as to not be that big of a deal. And at that point, I will stop and sit there and think about it for a bit. Which of these options will be prettier?
You know what I think about in that context is even though it's remote, what's the hardest to reach for opposing stuff?
Which costs me the more tiles I have to buy.
Well, that too, but usually that falls under the first consideration then, because you're getting equal adjacency, and one's available right now and one isn't. You just put it there where it's available. But if you have like literally equal yields and there's no like future plans or whatever, then I will favor the one that's further away from enemy cities / military units. Even though there's like virtually no chance they'll ever be there. That's like where my mind goes. I don't even think about how it looks.
Yes, if I had aesthetics in mind, I wouldn't be putting this. I wouldn't be putting my diplomatic quarter next to this encampment that is like smack dab in the middle of my cities. They're settled as close as possible.
Well, I think you can send the right message to opposing civilizations by putting your encampment next to that thing, so fair enough.
I still haven't built a diplomatic quarter.
They're kind of sucky.
Yeah, they don't pay off immediately, but you get used to them over time because, well, especially now they split up the envoy bonuses to be partially directly into the buildings and partially into the Diplo quarter building.
It doesn't the Diplo quarter like give you the most benefits if like the other civs are sending trade routes to that city?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I thought it was just that it gives you all your envoy bonuses and it gives you more influence, essentially.
I'd have to.
It's actually, and it's also good if you kill spies in the city with it. Or I think that's actually empire wide, but
Yeah, I keep forgetting what the heck it actually does, which is usually not good.
yeah, it's an anti. I think by default it starts off. It's an anti-spy thing. Basically, spies are less effective in the districts around it, and they're even less effective later on. And yeah, then it gives you part of your envoy bonuses from city-states, as well as more influence. That's pretty much it, I think.
I could have swore there was something that had to do with trade routes going through the city, but maybe it got patched out or I misread something somewhere.
Who knows? It's possible it did, and I just completely overlook it as well, and I think of it just as anti-espionage.
No, I'm looking at the wiki right now, and I'm not seeing what I was expecting to see, so apparently I'm just misremembering. I think I've only built like 2 of them so far, so...
To me, the annoying thing about it is that it's specialty. So if you're trying to actually build it with your government plaza, that's 2 of your specialties taken up, and that requires either a lot of population or you got to give up your holy site, your campus, your commercial hub, etc.
Your encampment district.
Yeah, I would definitely give it a much harder look if it were not a specialty district.
So that brings us to... This has been a PolyCast episode, of which number I have forgotten. 378. This has been PolyCast 378. I am one of your hosts, CanusAlbinus, and I have been joined with our usual hosts, TheMeInTeam.
That's right, your next district is an encampment.
MegaBearsFan.
I am eagerly waiting wide vaccine distribution so that I can play the new expansion for Civilization A New Dawn, Terra Incognita, board game.
And our Mackie fill-in for the week, TheChrisD.
Oh, but I don't end up under however much snow that Mackie's under now.
I don't know how much snow they got. I think they just got a lot of ice.
That's probably worse.
Yeah.
You guessed it, it's another encampment district.
In fact, that's probably where I am.
Shoot. Why did I do it this way?
Good job. This city will also build an encampment district.
Civilization 3, 4, 5, Beyond Earth, 6 sound clips, copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright the PolyCast at thepolycast.net.